And welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Going to talk some politics today. Of course, tariffs on everybody's minds. We'll talk about that some, and of course, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in the news. Allegations of cronyism and so forth. And boy, the polls have shifted somewhat with the federal Liberals perhaps catching up to the Conservatives. Wow, what's behind all of that? So our guest today is Leighton Grey. He is one of Canada's top attorneys. He's also the host of the Grey Matter podcast and television show. You can see that at returntoreason.com on Miracle Channel, and also you can check him out at Grey Matter Convo. So Leighton, thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back on your program, Paul.
Always fun to chat. So, well, let's get started on the tariffs, I guess. Canada, of course, given a 30-day reprieve from the 25% U.S. tariffs. And then right on the heels of that, boom, we have this 25% tariff on steel and aluminum from all countries, to be fair. Well, let me ask you first. I mean, the reprieve that we have here, and Mexico as well, did that come through diplomacy? Was that, partially due to Danielle Smith, or was that, our retaliation? What was behind that?
Well, I think the one thing we can be certain of is that Justin Trudeau and his government don't deserve any credit for it. I think that Danielle Smith needs to be credited for the work that she did, going down to Mar-a-Lago, even before Donald Trump's inauguration, and then being the only political leader who attended Donald Trump's inauguration. And she did a lot of really yeoman work, or woman work down there, as the case may be, building relationships and meeting with different people in American governance. And I think that these relationships are going to be very, very important going forward. So I think if anyone deserves credit for a reprieve, it's got to be Danielle Smith, especially since the plan that Justin Trudeau took credit for was really reading off of Danielle Smith's paper.
Okay, so the diplomacy angle is perhaps working better in this situation here, and that's my take on it as well. I mean, I understand of course, with an election coming up, you need to be seen as somebody who's pushing back and so forth. So, I mean, I get that. So now the steel and aluminum tariff here. My question is, are we maybe panicking a little bit too much? I mean, how much of a difference will this actually make? Now, I understand the U.S. gets, I think, about 60% of their aluminum from Canada and a whole chunk of the steel as well. So basically, I mean, the way, if I'm understanding tariffs correctly, the way this benefits the U.S. is that, if they can start to make their own industries buying locally, right, from the U.S., then that keeps that profit and the jobs in their country and so forth. But now, if there's a 25% tariff, then the price goes up in the U.S., right?
Right.
And they've got to get. I mean, they're kind of stuck with us here. Although apparently, I'm told that the actual factories they have down there for steel and aluminum are not working at full capacity, so it'll benefit them in that sense that they probably will get up to max capacity. But they don't have the time to build all these new aluminum and steel facilities. They're going to have to rely on us here during Trump's term for sure, right?
Oh, I think that's correct. And, the thing that people need to understand about tariffs is that although they may inferentially help certain governments in terms of building up trade surpluses, they always hurt consumers. It's always the consumer that pays the price. And it's even worse if you have retaliatory tariffs. Of course, our prime minister doesn't understand this because he thinks budgets balance themselves and he's not interested in fiscal matters. Those are his words, folks.
Yeah.
So he doesn't understand that retaliatory tariffs only compound the problem, so that when that cost is carried down to the consumer, as it always does, because of course when we consume things like automobiles and lawnmowers and whatever else we have that's made out of steel or aluminum, that cost is going to be paid by the consumer. That drives up inflation, and we really only conflagrate the problems that we're having in the United States and Canada. The interesting thing about tariffs, the interesting question that no one seems to be talking about, and I think we need to be talking about, is how serious is Trump about tariffs? In other words, are tariffs just a bluff because he wants to secure the border, or he wants a better overall trade deal? or is he really serious about tariffs? And it's hard to tell at this point because um, there just hasn't been enough sort of track laid out for us to find out. One thing we do know, I mean, most recently, anyone who watched the Super Bowl, there was an interview that Donald Trump had with Brett Baer of Fox News. He was asked specifically if he was serious about annexing Canada, and he's quite serious about it. And Justin Trudeau thinks he's
Is
serious
he
too.
saying that he's quite serious about it, or is he just saying that
He
to,
said, he
to
said,
get some leverage?
well, this is the question. But I mean, in his language, he's very clear. He
Yes.
said he's serious about making Canada the 51st state. He also said he doesn't think that what Mexico and Canada are offering in terms of a reprieve or addressing his concerns about the border are going to be enough. He says that really he claims that there's a $200 billion subsidy that's keeping Canada going, that we're essentially a welfare state of the United States. And that he said, and these are his words, he doesn't mind doing that if we're the 51st state. And so, I think as Canadians, we've got to begin to take this, seriously. And what's sort of consternating to me is that there are people in Canada. It's almost like we're living in the Matrix. People in Canada think that Canada is still a sovereign and free, independent nation, and the
We are
truth
so,
is,
yeah, we're
we're
so reliant on the U.S. for our protection.
right,
I mean, in
right,
that sense, we are completely a welfare state, subjected to the
yeah,
U.S. when it comes to our own protection.
yeah, and we're also very controlled by China, and I can prove it to you, Paul. If, for
Hmm.
example, if I said something about the vaccines, which I won't say, but you know what I could say, I
Hmm.
would get censored. If I made comments about January 6th, I would get censored. If I made comments about someone like George Soros, this interview would be censored. Well, if I'm being constantly censored for expressing free speech in a respectful, responsible way, am I living in a free and democratic society? Moreover, where our government is passing laws, has passed laws to restrict our speech, to restrict
Hmm.
our access to information. They will even want to pass a law to restrict what kinds of food we can eat, what kind of
Yeah,
our
that's pretty
access
sick.
to things like meat, our access to even to things like vitamins.
We can
So
eat
I
bugs
mean,
and you'll like it.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um,
So I mean, how free are we in I mean, I don't want to take this too far down the rabbit hole, but is Canada's choice to be a client state of China or to be the 51st state of the United States? Is that our
so,
real
so,
choice?
so, so these losses of freedoms you're saying are greatly being influenced by the giant China.
Oh, I think it all goes back to China.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's so
and
much
we have so
wisdom in
much.
them
I'm not
for.
I'm not telling you anything, Paul, but
Yeah.
I mean, the influence that China has over Canadian institutions, interference in our last two national elections.
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I'm not spilling the tea here.
And our
And I.
universities as well. I mean,
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
everywhere. But that'd be a separate show, I guess. But well, why don't we switch gears here for a second and
sure,
talk about the new border czar that was appointed by the
yeah,
prime minister here, Kevin Brussels, a
hmm
former high-ranking RCMP officer, right? And he was also an appointee of Trudeau's former deputy national security intelligence advisor. So he's been around, so he knows. I guess the intelligence and the law stuff, etc. Will he? I mean, he's been connected with the Liberal Party, though I
yeah,
think for a long time, so he's pretty
yes.
loyal to the Prime Minister. Is that going to affect how he polices the border and polices fentanyl?
The answer is absolutely. I mean, the best way to describe Mr. Brasso is that he's a career bureaucrat. He's
Okay.
from a wealthy family from Bonnyville, Alberta. It's interesting he was chosen.
Oh,
That he was
wow.
chosen from Alberta. I wonder if Danielle Smith had some influence there, but he is an Albertan. He graduated from the University of Alberta School of Law, which is my alma mater. He
Hmm.
also attended Harvard. He accepted a publicly funded scholarship to go to Harvard, but he really washed out of the legal profession and has been a career bureaucrat. And of course, his family has very close connections to the Liberal Party of Canada generationally. And there's no question that his star rose within the RCMP because of his political connections. And so it's not surprising to see someone like Mr. Brasso be appointed. In fact, he's exactly the kind of person that Justin Trudeau tends to
Okay.
bring to high office. And so I don't think that we should expect him to be anything but totally loyal to the Liberal Party of Canada.
Do you think he'll get right on it and get real tough on crime and so forth, tough on the border, or are you expecting something a little more waffling around the middle sort of thing?
I think it's going to be. I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you a metaphor. It'll be like telling a teenager to clean up their room. Everything is going to get shoved under the bed, right?
Okay, enough said then.
Okay. Okay. So you'll have the appearance of something having been cleaned, but we're not going to see that. And the reason why is the Liberals are not interested in cleaning up the border. The Liberal Party of Canada, Liberal government, is a globalist government. Justin Trudeau said recently that Canadians have been brainwashed to believe that we should be looking after ourselves and our own families. Of course, this goes contrary to Scripture.
Hmm.
In fact, it's blasphemy. But this is what he says: we have a totally globalist government. Of course, one of the keys to globalism is open borders, and so this is what the Liberal Party of Canada is committed to. And whether it's Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland or someone else, the Liberal Party of Canada, that's what they're going to be committed to, and so that is their main objective. I think what you're seeing now, especially with the mixed messaging that Justin Trudeau, the sort of passive aggression stance he's taking with Donald Trump, I think reveals the real liberal agenda. Because if they were sincere about doing something about the border, and they should be, because it's
It should.
shameful that Canada is a net exporter of fentanyl to the United States. That's shameful that that's the case. But they're not committed to doing anything about that. And I think that's becoming abundantly clear.
All right. Well, our premier here in Alberta wants to switch some of that stuff. Why don't we, first of all, though, maybe start with, I guess, the allegations against her and the UCP government.
Yeah.
There's again, this is regarding the procurement procedure for allocating contracts to supply AHS and so forth. So Alberta Health Services, right now, were there leaders? There's allegations that the premier's right hand man was involved in this and so forth to award contracts to friends of the government. So those are the allegations. But the other side of the coin would be, is it a smear campaign?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
thing with the smear campaign is, of course, even if there's no evidence to prove things, now you've got everybody talking about it, and so the damage is perhaps already done, the PR damage, right? So.
Hmm.
Did it really happen? Did it not? Are they just covering it up and so forth? I mean, reality is, I guess, when things like this happen, okay, so I tend to be, lean more conservative, right? So here I am, a member of the press. Okay, so I can do a show like this, and I can, if it was the NDP that was under this kind of pressure, I might be inclined to say, oh yeah, this is, boy, and really get on it, even though I might not have any evidence of it, right? But
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
hearing the hearsay, okay, and vice versa now. If you have a left-leaning media, which most of the mainstream media is, they tend to jump on that bandwagon and really say, yeah, boy, he's just kind of pointing toward, yeah, probably guilty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I think the right way to handle it, as far as I'm concerned, I hope I'm going to do that. is let's look for some facts. Let's look for some evidence. And you know what? If the person is guilty, if the party is guilty, then there needs to be consequences. I mean, that is a biblical principle, right? That
Hmm.
there's,
Hmm.
you do the crime, you do the time. Okay, so we need to be unbiased in that sense and look for facts. What I'm seeing so far is accusations, allegations, and a letter to a lawyer.
Hmm.
I'm looking where now. I mean, the optics are horrible, of course, because this happening around the time that the firing of the CEO and also of the board. So the optics are not good. But where is the actual evidence? Now, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think there is a lot of evidence. I don't think there's any evidence that Danielle Smith or her government is corrupt in the way that the allegation is being made. I think, though, there has been a history of cronyism within the UCP or the Conservative Party. In
Hmm.
recent history, obviously Alison Redford had to resign under very, very conspicuous circumstances, and that has sort of led to a lot of scrutiny of the way that this government, the UCP government or the Conservative government, has behaved. And we have seen some political appointments. Alison Redford received a plum appointment by this government. So did others. Jason Kenney has received, some of the Kenney cabinet ministers.
So
For example, Mr. Chandro received
So
a plum
it's being
appointment.
tied perhaps to our premier, even though maybe she wasn't directly involved in that, right?
Right. There's sort of these, and then most recently, Casey Maydew, who was the justice minister who
Right.
imprisoned pastors, and shut down and barricaded a church in Alberta. His wife was recently made a judge, was appointed by a judge by this government. So there have been some allegations of cronyism, but I think the real culprit is going back to Jason Kenney during COVID. It was revealed that his government really was uh, was was behaving illegally during the COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately, that has now created an environment in which Danielle Smith is under very close scrutiny. She also has the same problem that Donald Trump had, and that is all of the media is really against her.
Hmm.
The Edmonton Journal, the Calgary Herald, Global News, CBC, CTV, they really are leftist apparatchiks, and they're out to get her. But I think they're going to be disappointed. My knowledge of the premier, and I have had the pleasure of meeting with her on a number of occasions and watching the way she conducts herself. She is a very astute politician. She's a very intelligent lady. I don't sense that there's any insincerity. I find that she's very genuine, and to my knowledge, she's conducted herself very ethically. I mean, her biggest political mistake was on full display when she crossed the floor, and it looked
Oh,
like it cost her political career.
it's many
And
years ago, but yeah,
yeah, I mean, people don't talk about what an incredible. They talk about Trump's comeback story. Wow, what a comeback story she has been.
it's true.
And
Pretty
and
amazing,
I
yeah.
think
Okay.
she's probably the most popular Canadian politician right now.
Yeah, well,
You
I
know,
think a big part of that is, of course, how she handled the Trump situation there and
yeah,
did well, right? So,
yeah,
she certainly shows some wisdom anyway in her approach and,
yeah.
her
Hmm.
reading the room. So, time will tell here. We'll keep a close eye on it and see how it goes for Premier Smith. Now, she does want to get tough on crime, she says.
Yeah.
She's kind of giving Ottawa an ultimatum: get rid of these soft drug laws and hand over. If they don't, which they likely won't, give the drug-related prosecutions to Alberta. Talking about
Hmm.
mandatory minimum sentences and so forth, that sort of thing. So, is she going to get any traction out of that? You think?
I hope so. She's very serious about addressing drug addiction in Alberta.
Yeah.
There are 11 new treatment centers that have been constructed in Alberta for this purpose. I know it's a key point of her administration. But if she's going to reduce crime, it's all fine to wag the finger at the Liberals, but there's a deeper problem, and that the sort of saying this out loud. But when you look at the top 20 cities in North America, that's Canada, the United States, in terms of accepting people from the third world. Toronto is number one, Calgary's number two, and Edmonton's number four. We
Wow.
we have a lot of people coming into Alberta who don't share our values. They're
Hmm.
from countries that don't have respect for example, women, and the sanctity of private property and so on. And frankly, when you look at a lot of the crime that's happening, especially in urban places, and of course, I'm not spilling the tea here, but the preponderance of probability is that it's people who have not been in this country for very long, and some of them are actually not even supposed to be here. So, if we're going to reduce crime, I think that Alberta also has to take a stance on taking a closer look at who's coming into Alberta, who's coming here. Of course, the Quebec premier has already addressed this and has told Ottawa that in Quebec they're going to be more scrutinizing about what sort of immigrants are allowed into the province. But
Yeah, I
until
mean,
we address that flood of people coming into Alberta, I think the crime is
yeah.
going to continue.
I mean, you speak out, and of course, I mean, right now there's a lot of people saying you're racist and so forth, you're discriminatory. No, you're just, I mean, sharing. This is nothing to do with skin color, but it does have
No.
a lot to do with the culture
Yes.
that they're coming from whatever nation they're coming from. If there's a different culture, a different set of values, they bring that along. And again, nothing to do with race. It's just the reality of the society that
Precisely.
they live in
Yeah.
and coming over here.
Yeah.
And it would be foolish not to realize that and
Yeah.
to do something about it.
Yeah.
Let's switch.
That puts it well.
Well, we come back into to federal politics here. Let me just touch base here on, and actually before I do that, I should mention this because all of this just kind of makes me ponder. What should our priorities be?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about woke issues, crime, these kinds of things, freedom of speech, economic health, but there's also spiritual health. How much of
Mm-hmm.
this has a spiritual dimension to it. And, I think it really does. So, again, a lot of it comes back down to, you and me, and, so much of our audience, is Christian. We need to call ourselves up and say, hey, you know what? Let's all get serious about, setting a good role model, good example, and let's pray for Canada, right? I mean,
Yes.
we say, oh, we can just pray, but
Yeah.
no, prayer makes a difference. I mean,
Amen.
okay, I'll get off the pulpit here, but there's my little
Well,
plug there. That this
Paul,
is serious.
you're not alone in this, though. The Vice President of the United States said
Hmm.
this publicly on national television. He was talking about something called the Ordo Amoris, which is in Scripture, as you know, which says that we are under a duty to care for our families and
Hmm.
and by extension to our communities and our nation. And we're called to do that before we start worrying about people in other nations. And of course, our government is committed to something entirely different. But I quite agree with you. But I found it very encouraging to see someone as high ranking as the Vice President of the United
Yeah.
States actually quoting Scripture and Christian doctrine. That's a sign that God is working.
Will we ever see that in Canada? I'm
I
hoping and
believe we
praying.
will. I believe we will. You know,
Let's believe for that. Well, the polls are shifting, though. Really interesting. We can touch base on that too. What's up with that? And again, I think a lot of that probably does have to do with the tariff threats and so
yeah.
forth, and Trump. Let me just talk a little bit about I guess the liberal leadership race. Chrystia Freeland, interesting. She's introduced a plan here to make life more affordable, she wants to place a cap on profit margins for grocers. Essential items like eggs, milk, vegetables,
Mhm.
baby formula, that sort of thing. She wants to make shrinkflation illegal, right? So we get things made in smaller packages, but charge the same price, right? And capping credit card interest rates at 15%. So and many of us would say that sounds good, right? And the intentions are good. Question is, how far do you go with government controls?
Mhm.
Because that can impact the way the economy works as well. I mean, as you've got business people who are saying, well, if we can't make a profit, why would we bother investing in Canada?
Mhm.
Your
Well,
thoughts?
first of all, Chrystia Freeland is a socialist. She
Yeah.
wrote a book on socialism. I read it, and having read her book, she doesn't understand socialism. She doesn't understand its harm. She certainly doesn't understand it the way Margaret Thatcher did, who said that socialism is basically the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. Winston Churchill called socialism the ideology of failure, and the Liberal Party of Canada has proven that to be true empirically. So I don't believe a word that any of these liberals say. They are all about everything comes down to more government control. What we have had in Canada now, going back to COVID, has been a government of emergency. And the reason why they want to declare everything an emergency, including right now, they want to declare an economic emergency.
Yeah.
And is because when there is an emergency, well, then people are more ready to give up their freedoms to the government and to get the government to solve all the
We'll let
problems.
Big Daddy take care of us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How about just switching to Mark Carney? It looks like he's probably going to win that race, although time will tell. Is he any less socialist, or is he pretty much down that same line?
He's even more so. In fact, he's scarier because he actually understands globalism. I mean, this is a man who he puts out a promotional picture of him playing street hockey. He's wearing
Yes,
$2,000 sneakers. Okay,
he's one of us, right?
he's completely disconnected from the
That car
reality
is
that.
worth $2,000.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's completely disconnected from reality. I don't believe these polls. I think what we're seeing with the polls is the same thing that happened during the U.S. election when it showed Kamala was neck and neck with Trump, and or at certain times in the lead, and it turned out that actually the Democrats were immensely unpopular. The liberals right now are as unpopular as any
okay,
government I've ever seen in
you
my
believe we're going to
lifetime.
see those polls switch back a bit. Interesting. Now, let me ask you, do you think we're going to see an early election, and what is going to be the main issue in this upcoming election?
I don't think we're going to see an early election unless the Liberals do what they did in 2021, and that is to declare a public emergency and force
Uh,
the election during a time, because that, of course, that makes the election much easier to fix. If unless that happens, I think that they're going to forestall the election for as long as possible, and they're going to continue to steal some of the Mr. Poilievre's best ideas. But Mr. Poilievre,
main election point? Like, I'm running out of time. Main
yeah,
election point would be tariffs?
no, I don't think. I'm not. No, not for the Liberals. The Liberals are going to promise to fix. They're going to try and distance themselves from the
Okay.
Trudeau regime and promise to fix all the problems that Trudeau caused.
I got to leave it there. So thanks so much, Leighton. It's always so much fun talking to you. Leighton Grey, again, host of the Grey Matter podcast television show. Return to reason.com or at Grey Matter Convo. Check out wiseup.ca. Tell your friends about us. God bless.